This is Hunt Nebraska, the official podcast for insight into Nebraska's hunting and shooting sports community. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, our space for sharing stories, information, tips, and techniques. Now, Hunt Nebraska.
All right, we are back. We're hanging out today. The How to Deer series in the books.
You'll learn to hunt cabin here. Yeah.
My goodness, and now we've got more, folks. We're having all sorts of critical stuff that we need to discuss when it comes to hunting. I'm Hershey, he's Jeff, both with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. And today, for your listening and or viewing pleasure, if you're catching us on YouTube, one hunter from the National Wild Turkey Federation.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so real quick, we'll give folks a rundown. If you haven't already, go to our Facebook page, Hunt Nebraska. Give a click on there. That's where the folks that hunt and do some recreational shooting and all that fun stuff and get their information directly from the Nebraska Game and Parks can do just that. So give that a like and make sure that you jump on, any of the audio apps or YouTube there that you found us on first, and give us a subscribe, give us a thumbs up and all that good stuff, so you know when the next podcast of Hunt Nebraska hits the airwaves. All right, today we're talking a little hunter lingo, and so we brought in Hunter.
Nikolai.
I mean, that makes sense. So this is the first time you've been on this podcast, Hunter.
Yes, it is. I'm excited to be here, like I said, and looking forward to giving the people what they want when it comes to hunter lingo.
Oh, this is going to be good. You were destined to work in this world. I mean, your parents even named you correctly.
Right.
I mean, that was a good move.
Now, the good news is you're happy. You can tell we're just starting the podcast here, because usually by the end of the podcast, most folks, maybe a little less happy to be part of the podcast.
There's been some crying.
All right. But, yeah. Most folks have been able to, recover professionally, Hunter. So keep that in mind.
Most.
But folks, we are here to talk about words and phrases and things that hunters say. Not just our hunter, but all hunters across this great state and nation. And sometimes it's like we're speaking our own language.
We are speaking our own language.
I mean, you're
no
probably right
about it.
because we've got words and terms that we use, and we just assume everybody knows what we're talking about. And we're going to go over some of those, especially if you're new to hunting. Maybe if you've been doing it for quite a few years, and you wonder, well, what does that mean? That sounds like a made-up thing. Hey, that's part of the fun. We get to use words and terms that you probably don't get to use many other places, and they have very specific meanings. So we're going to jump right into this.
All right.
You guys ready?
Let's do it.
Are you guys ready? Hunter lingo, and this is one that's deer season here in the state of Nebraska. Obviously, the rut, Jeff, kicking on.
Oh,
it really is.
It's in swing. Yeah, it's really getting going here.
So we dream about it as deer hunters in Nebraska. What is the rut? We've actually asked people, what are some of the terms that you hear hunters use that you don't understand what it is? And rut comes back, and we use that one a lot.
We really do. And it's an exciting time for hunters, because that's when deer are running all out through the deer woods like crazy, and that gives us an opportunity to get in contact with deer. The rut generally is the breeding season for deer. I mean, that's just in a nutshell, that's kind of what it is. But there's different phases of that breeding season. There's that point, and we get into late September, early October, where deer are starting to make sign. They're rubbing on trees. They're making scrapes. We can talk about those later, but they're leaving deer sign in the woods. They're starting to get a little aggressive with each other as we move into late October, like where we're at right now, getting pretty aggressive with each other. And then they get into that chasing phase where they start chasing does early November. And then if we get into early to mid-November, breeding phase, where they're actually could care less maybe about chasing other bucks off and fighting. They like to be with those does, and those does are receptive. That's all caused by the change in day length. As the day length gets shorter, that causes the rut to take off. So that, in essence, in a 30-second interview, that's the rut.
So that basically their breeding season and all the things that go into that, which is pretty cool. Now, Hunter, this is one that we really get excited about as soon as we start seeing. And Jeff, you kind of alluded to it: rubs and scrapes. People hear us talk about that, but what's the difference?
Yep. So a rub is when a deer or a buck is going to be rubbing their antlers on a tree. And when you're out scouting and out looking for deer, you're going to want to look for open bark, basically, where that buck gashed that tree open. Yep. And then a scrape is down on the ground, where a buck's rubbing and tearing that ground up with their foot, marking their territory and leaving their scent usually above it on a stick or a branch that overhangs that spot. And they'll revisit those spots. Other bucks will come through and visit those spots as a mark of territory too. So shows the kick off of the rut. It's really what hunters are out there looking for when they're scouting.
See those things. We're excited.
We're excited. And those rubs, like you said, they're up on that tree, so they're a little bit more visible because it's like, oh, where'd the bark go? Why is that tree rubbed up that high? No problem. Those scrapes, a little bit more difficult at times because they're on the ground. Sometimes we see them, and you know, if you're not looking for them, it's easy to walk right past. I really think that torn up ground can disappear. Now, the fun fact is they also urinate in them. And not just urinate in them, folks. They squat down, get that urine flowing through their tarsal glands on both bucks and does to add a little scent out there. And that's what sometimes you smell. If you harvest, especially a antler deer, a buck, here in Nebraska during the rut, you're going to smell that.
Oh, that tarsal gland is ripe. Yeah, no question.
It is. No mistaking that on the
hind leg. On the hind legs. Yep.
Yeah, we could go through glands and all sorts of things. There's a lot of glands that are there. They speak through their nose and their sense of smell there in the deer woods, to say the least. So that we got the main things with this, the rut, things you look for in the rut as far as rubs and scrapes. Now we're going to go to one here, and this is one I'm going to toss this out to both of you. Because you hear hunters talking about where I'm going to hunt. And folks know, all right, bedding area, that makes sense. Where deer bed. Feeding area, hey, there's food there. Also, you know, pretty straightforward. But you hear a lot of hunters say, I'm looking for a pinch point. I'm looking for a funnel. Yeah. And there's some other names in there as well, high banks and highways and all that type of stuff. What is that?
Yeah. You know, I'll jump in here first, and Hunter, you can add to it. But, you know, a pinch point or a funnel is just what that means. It's an area that funnels or pinches deer activity into a tiny area. And I always tell people it's kind of analogous to your hallway in the house. You know, you got all these rooms on one side of the house, all these rooms on the other side. But when you walk down that hallway, that pinches you into about a 4-foot area. And that's you know, same in the deer woods. And so you got a lot of woods, a lot of grass area, and all of a sudden a fence line that connects those two pinches those deer maybe really tight, or the draw narrows to 30, 40 feet, pinches those deer in real tight. They don't want to leave the sanctity of that area, so they want to stay in that area. So it gives hunters an opportunity to get a lot closer to deer, because those are areas, those pinch points or funnels are just going to be natural areas that deer can't avoid being, you know, too far away from your stand.
Yeah, trail intersections, things like that. And what's the beauty of that, Hunter, is obviously what deer kind of more likely to move through that area with all those different options.
I was out this past weekend actually sitting in, we call them in Wisconsin necks, typically neck or a pinch point.
Bottlenecks.
Yeah, bottlenecks. And exactly that. There's a big set of woods I was hunting, and then there was a jut out of about 100 yards, set of woods in between a prairie and an ag field, and that little patch there had a lot of deer trails and deer sign through it, and I found a scrape line through there as well. So your odds of seeing deer moving through there are going to be greater, and you're going to be able to get a lot closer to them with some provided cover for you as well, because the deer want to remain in that cover as best they can.
Yeah, exactly. The more opportunity, the more confidence you think you're going to have of seeing a deer, the longer you sit.
Absolutely, good point.
Yep. The less Halloween candy you have to consume just to stay alert there on the
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't say you have to consume less. I don't think there's any correlation there whatsoever.
Oh, definitely. I think so. We're gonna have to do a study on that one.
Personal preference.
That's a good one. Now, here's one that I really haven't heard used a lot here in Nebraska, but it is an important one. You hear it in a lot of other states, especially those that have a lot of timber or, you know, hilly country. Not that we don't, but it seems the higher and more dense the woods, the more you hear this term used, and that's saddle. Who wants to tackle that one? Hunter, you come from a state with a little bit more trees than perhaps Nebraska. So
yep, I haven't saddle hunted before. I typically use a climber or a ladder stand, but I know they're becoming more popularity with use. And I assume you're referring to a saddle.
Well, you know, that's an excellent point. No, I wasn't.
Okay, well.
Boom.
Let's go there. There are saddle stands,
Yeah.
Kind of fill a gap in a tree, so to speak.
Right. It's a method of kind of hanging out in a tree without a solid stand. But What saddle are you referring to?
This is how confusing our lingo really is.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point because we changed this. Back in the day, that was more of a terrain feature. And now it is probably more of a hunting style or what you hunt from. You just have to watch out for the saddle horn, Jeff.
Yeah.
But, what did you know saddle as growing up?
Well, and again, I look at saddle as terrain. This is why our lingo is confusing sometimes. We say, I'm going to hunt that saddle. Usually it's a terrain feature because you might have two ridges, and the connecting the saddle between those ridges, that's generally a lower point, is where, just like if you were going to hike those hills, you'd go up that saddle, not climb the peak, right? You'd go up through that saddle. That's what game do. Big game want to go up that saddle when they're climbing or coming down off ridges. And so those are natural areas to hunt because that's where, again, talking about a funnel, funnels more game into that particular area. You're going to see more game versus trying to hunt, ridges or ridge points where it's just a lot of work. Why would a deer want to climb a ridge and up on a peak when it can go up through that saddle, which is just a lot easier to climb?
And that's when, like I said, it seems like the more hilly the terrain, the more rugged the country, more timbered it is, you really look for those. And out in western Nebraska, I think you really can key on that. You got to kind of have an eye for it at times out there as well. All right, we're going to get into we're going to get in the field of stink. All right, scent control. We hear it quite a bit as hunters, as folks that are just listening to hunters and things like that. In deer season, we really worry about our stink and that scent control. So Jeff, I know that you kind of get into this just a little bit.
Yeah, I stink.
So let's talk about scent control.
Yeah. Well, scent control is nothing you can do to control the area around you. Really, nothing you can do to control deer scent, but you control how you smell to some degree. And to a deer, you stink. And I hate to tell you that. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we do. And deer have an incredible nose. What do we say? 800 times more powerful than your best hunting dog. I mean, incredible nose. And so we control our scent. Guys and gals do all kinds of things, from washing their clothes in special detergents and then zipping them in a Ziploc clothes bag and throwing them in a pile of cedar chips and doing all kinds of things to make sure that that their scent is different than what it might appear to be to a deer. And then of course, all kinds of scents that they might use in the field. I'm not a big believer in all that, but scent control is also hunting with your nose to the wind, controlling what scent that deer will smell when it comes into you. And so there's a lot of ways to control your scent.
Yeah,
but you do need to worry about your scent when it comes to deer. You can't really fool a deer's nose very easily, but you're not going to harvest a lot of deer if they can smell you.
They've got to smell something.
Yeah.
Nothing can smell like nothing. And so, like you said, you can limit it. There's certain things on the market to kill it. There's cover scents. Have you ever used any of the cover scents, Hunter?
I'm not big into cover scents. I do use doestrus when the rut comes, but I'm more so, like Jeff said, like to position myself using the wind and getting up in a tree and getting my scent up above them more so than I do controlling that scent with product from the store. But I know guys are big into it, guys and gals alike, and it's a big heated debate on what you need to do to control that scent because deer can smell you.
Oh, yeah. There's stuff you can spray that actually breaks down your scent molecules at the molecular level. Those are kind of interesting. There's some success with those. I think there's people that might swear by them, others that might not. But and then there's others that mask your scent. You want to smell like an apple, or you want to smell like cedar or pine. That's not bad because it smells a lot better than we do to a deer. But masking your scent really is only going to probably confuse deer for a brief moment. It isn't like deer are going to come right up that trail right to you because they'll figure that out. But if we can confuse them a little bit, that can work in your favor. But there's a lot of things we do. But I agree, hunting with your nose to the wind is probably priority number one.
There you go. Attractants, that's another thing. They've got food flavors and scents and things like that, as well as the
They just tend to make me hungry.
Estrus and all that. So
I'm not a big attractant.
Well, it always is fun because some of the folks that hygiene isn't all that important until you get to deer season. Then all of a sudden they're the best scrubbed and most washed individuals that you'll probably meet. It really can be. Here's one, and these are actually two terms. These are two terms that I kind of have some troubles with. They're words that pop in and pop out of the lingo quite a bit. When you're reading magazines or listening to a video or another podcast, you're going to hear these words used quite a bit, especially on field edges. Inside corner and outside corner. And I got to tell you, these kind of confuse me at times. I got to think of inside corner, outside. Which one is this? I don't know. It's a corner. But that doesn't count anymore in deer hunting. You got to be really specific. So let's start with a outside corner. Jeff, you want to tackle that, and then we'll let Hunter tackle the inside corner because they're
to me, an outside corner is that area where the woods or something might jet out into a field. That's your outside corner. The corner that takes a deer outside of their core area, their core cover, into the field. So those could be extensions of a draw or just the corner edge of a woodlot or what have you.
So that's the outside edge.
That's the outside.
And the inside edge?
Yep, the inside corner then is kind of the opposite of that, where those wood points come together, kind of on the inside edge of a field or a break in different habitat types. So if you think of it kind of like your concave point where those two wood edges come together.
Concave point.
And really a nice travel. Again, those deer want to stay inside that cover. So deer traveling through there and want to stay along that.
Leave it to Hunter to add geometry.
Oh, I was impressed.
Concave inside.
Big words,
oh my goodness, geometry to deer hunting. I know this is going to be tough on me now, but that's one you hear quite a bit. Inside corner, outside corner. I think I can't argue with what you guys are saying. Like I said, I think we used to call a lot of them draws and waterways and things like that. So off we go. And here's one. I'm going to wrap this up with deer, and then we're going to get into some other things because we got some other hunts coming up and seasons that are happening now. But let's finish it up where every successful deer hunt ends, and that's field dressing and then processing. A lot of folks try to use those words interchangeably, Hunter, but they're really not. So let's kick it off. What's the difference between field dressing and processing?
Yep. So field dressing is immediately after you harvest an animal, you're going to want to get the innards, so all your guts and all your inside organs out of that deer right away. And that is your field processing your deer. And then field dressing, and then your processing your deer takes place typically out of the field where you're skinning the deer, quartering the deer, and then breaking it down into your select cuts, all the way for storage into the freezer. So basically, put simply, your field dressing's in the field, your processing takes place kind of back at home or at the processor where they break that meat down and get it ready to go for cooking.
It makes sense to me. Those are two important steps in the whole getting your deer from field into the freezer or on the table and all that good stuff. So, guys, am I missing anything that you want to talk about in deer when it comes to lingo on the deer hunt?
Thousands of words we're missing, but yeah, we got to end it somewhere.
We got to end it. All right. Well, we're not ending it just the deer piece because this weekend pheasant season opens up for all of us here in the state of Nebraska. The youth got a crack at it last weekend. Now we're recording that just a couple of days ahead of the pheasant and quail season. By the time we get this out, it might be right after or just has recently opened up. But this is kind of a fun one. So we're going to get into the upland bird world. All right. And this one's one you hear a lot of pheasant hunters talk about, CRP. And I'm going to go hunt that CRP field. Oh, how's the CRP field looking? All that type of stuff. And this is actually, there's more to it than just 3 letters, Jeff.
Yeah. CRP is the Conservation Reserve Program, and of course, what that means is there's land that has been set aside, land that isn't generally as farmable, it's maybe highly erodible, that didn't make great farm ground, and Congress enacted the CRP program to set aside that land, pay landowners for setting that land aside and planting it back to wildlife habitat. The benefits have been just incredible all across the United States, not just for hunting. Hunting is a small part of that. Huge benefits to wildlife, huge benefits to protecting our soils and our lands and our ag fields and our habitat fields and whatnot. But that CRP planted back to native grasses, a lot of mixed and tall grass type grasses and forbs and various plants that provide cover and food and shelter for a lot of our wildlife, provide hunters a place to go and hunt, and provide wildlife access and viewing for all of our citizens here in Nebraska, and protect that soil from moving or becoming erodible. So huge bonus for Nebraska and for the Midwest. Highly important program.
Oh, it really is. Makes a huge difference. And when it's prime, a lot of birds can make use of that. All right, Hunter. Now, in a pheasant's day, you'll hear a lot of people talk about what they're doing. And early on, they're talking about pheasants in roosting cover or they're on the roost or anything along those lines. So what does that mean to the hunter that's going out looking for birds early? What is a roost and why is it important?
Yeah, roost is important because that's, your start of your day and start of your pheasant hunt. That's where the birds are going to be in the morning, right? They're going to be roosting there, and you really that's kind of the key and starting point as a pheasant hunter when you're starting your day, is finding those pheasants first off.
When you think of a roost for pheasants, what kind of things are you looking for, Jeff?
Gnarliest, thickest cover I usually can find. Now, it depends now, right? Early season like where we're at right now, it may just be weedy fields, edges, edges of weedy fields. As the winter goes on and it gets colder and snowier, the thickest, gnarliest cover that you can find is generally going to hold more birds. And it's just like, waterfowl roost on a pond, turkeys roost in a tree, pheasants roost on the ground, so they need protection from predators, and that's what gives them protection.
So roost, all right, we got that figured out. Feeding areas, again, pretty straightforward. That's where they're finding the seeds and the leftover grains and types of things like that they need to eat. Another fun term, and this one here I always get a kick out of, because it's loaf, because upland birds do loaf. And folks, basically, in my opinion, what that means is they're not feeding, they're not roosting, it's not the breeding season or the pheasant rut, if you want to call it that. So we got to come up with a term. So they're loafing. Yeah. They're just taking it easy. Cover. What is loaf cover, though, Jeff?
Yeah, and again, you think about it in transitions of what a bird's doing and what it needs. It's roosting in that heavier, gnarlier cover. Then it makes its way out into those grain fields or wherever it's going to be eating. Could be grassland, grain fields, wherever, depending on what its food source is going to be. And then it's out in those grain fields. It's pretty visible. They don't want to spend all day being visible out there, so they might make their way back toward maybe roosting cover. But it's not quite going into the thick, gnarly stuff that they were in sleeping, because they want to be close to the grain fields. They want to be able to move around. So it's kind of a medium, if you will, cover. Could be grassland, fence rows, what have you. Where they can go about their business, move around, maybe get a little bit of food now and then throughout the late morning and whatnot. But it also provides protection, so it's not just out in the open harvested grain field where they have very little protection. Might provide protection from the sun, the wind, snow, what have you. But it's not as thick of cover as their roosting cover.
All right, and here's another one. I think this is one of the important, especially for bird hunters here in Nebraska and kind of on the Great Plains. You'll hear the term stubble field. In fact, we've got a whole guide that talks about stubble field access. Now, I'm going to pick on you just a little bit, Hunter, because this is something that you've probably heard but might not have experienced yet now that you're a new Nebraskan by choice. When you hear the word stubble field, what are you thinking of?
I'm thinking of just a field of different grass and shrub types that kind of down to stubble,
he's spot on. And in Nebraska, you're generally thinking of wheat and milo, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what we generally, those plants form a stem, of course, grow, and they're grasses, right? And when we cut the heads off of those for harvest, what's left is the stem part, which is the stubble. And that forms a really nice bed of loafing cover, feeding cover. Can be really good early season for sure.
Now, one thing that I remember growing up, Hunter, is that corn stubble. We spent some time in the corn stubble because there was plenty of weeds in there. There was some that didn't quite get hit by the combine head or the picker back at that time quite right. And so you had a pretty good amount of cover. But now, I'm with Jeff. It's that stubble from wheat oftentimes. It can be also from that sorghum. And you're going to get to love those because they're an overlooked spot here in the state of Nebraska, cut at the right height. Yep. They got birds. That just between you and me, though. All right, don't share that with anybody else.
You, me, and the Hunt Nebraska fans.
Yeah, we even have an entire guide to public stubble access here in Nebraska. So outdoornebraska.gov, you can find that.
All right, we're going to switch gears again. Now we're going to go to a bird with webbed feet. We're going to kind of do ducks and geese together. We're going to do waterfowl here, and we're going to start with ducks. All right, we're going to start with ducks. And we're going to go with the decoys. Well, let's start general. Let's take a step back. Let's come up with names you've heard the decoys called, because a lot of waterfowl hunting, both ducks and geese here in the state of Nebraska, are done over decoys, right? But we've got a lot of names for them. As hunters, we call our decoys a whole bunch of things, those fake things that we try to use to bring them close. So besides decoy, Hunter, you get first crack at it. We're going to see who gets the most of these right here. So you say one, and then Jeff will see if he can come up with one, and then we'll go back. So
First one that comes to my mind is your spread or your combination of your decoys.
Oh,
there you go. He took the whole thing. He got more than one
Get
decoy
them
in
all
there.
in one there.
You got 'em all.
Yep, the spread. That's a good one.
That's good. Yep. What else? What do you got?
Oh no, you got to give one. Now, don't
finish.
let him do that to you.
Deeks.
Deke. Yep, that's one Deke. That's
You gotta
something.
remember I'm new to waterfowl hunting, so I
you
haven't
got your
heard them all
deeks,
like
you got your
you.
shells, your floaters, your rags, your bags, your socks. There's a lot of things we call decoys.
Yeah, that's
Fakes.
a pretty good list. Fakes, yeah, there
Plastics.
you go.
Corks.
Corks. I have not heard that one until the show just now.
Yeah, a few new to me there too.
But the shadows, the silhouettes you've already talked about, lots of different names for those
Full
different
bodies,
things. And
yep.
sometimes they actually, full body, sometimes they describe the whole decoy and what type of decoy it is and what form it takes. But oftentimes it's just loving words for our decoys that we like so much. All right, now we're going to get into ducks. We have the term drake and hen, which hunter means what?
Male and female.
Male and female. And in geese, Jeff, that's
Male and female, still. Goose, gander.
goose and gander. There you go.
I just wanted to see if he's paying attention. It's still male and female.
He was
Hershey.
buying himself time right there. He was buying. So I'm going to ignore him for a little bit. And we're going to talk about non-toxic shot because upland bird hunting, we hear that from time to time, but not near as much as we do during duck and goose hunts. It's something that's required for our duck and goose hunts. What is non-toxic shot?
Yep, non-toxic shot is non-lead shot, so steel, bismuth, and others that you can only use during waterfowl seasons. It's federally mandated at that. And basically the purpose of that is lead shot lives in the environment for a long time, and if you're using lead shot on waterfowl, other predatory birds and fish species that are exposed to that can be killed from that. So as hunters, it's our responsibility to only use that non-toxic shot when we're hunting waterfowl, just to make sure we're not leaving that lead out there on the landscape for those other animals to consume.
Good.
Yeah, there was a concern that ducks were diving down and picking up that lead and getting it in the crop, and of course not doing them real good. Yeah, and then birds would eat those ducks and have those issues. And so that was a huge movement back in the 80s, and we've been following that ever since and reducing those impacts over time.
And it has helped. I know in some of the big areas that we waterfowl hunt here in Nebraska and beyond. All right, moving on. We're going to get into calls. Now, we're going to start with ducks, and we'll move our way up to geese. Duck calls, Jeff. Yeah. I mean, we're trying to sound first and foremost like a hen mallard. Probably one of the more talkative, more heard.
The quack is the hen, right?
Right.
The drakes are a whistle. The hen's a quack. Quack.
And quack, we learned that ducks quack, pretty early in life. I don't know if that was preschool, if our parents told us, but you could just kind of know. However, hunters have taken it to the nth degree, and they all of a sudden say, all right, I'm not just quacking. I'm doing a greeting call. I'm doing a highball. I'm doing a welcome. I'm doing a comeback call. I'm doing all sorts of stuff. So let's start with the highball.
Yeah, highball. The highball is simply when those ducks are way out there and we're trying to get their attention, we'll throw out a call that rarely a hunter has ever heard before from an actual duck, right? We call it the highball.
I'm not sure we've ever heard it from a duck.
And that's that. And what that's doing is putting a long quacking call out there and getting those ducks to kind of give you a look. Maybe they'll see your decoys. Maybe they'll turn their heads. And actually, every once in a while it works. And they turn and they start coming into your spread. And so that's the highball. And it's also a good way to see duck tails if you do it when they're too close.
Yeah. It's a loud call. There's no doubt about it. It's one of those things that they must think, boy, I think that's a duck. Does that sound like a duck to you? And then they just bring the whole flock a little closer to go. So greeting call. Let's bring this all the way down. What is a greeting call? Obviously not the highball, so it's not as loud.
It's just taking the highball down a little bit and giving kind of like a, generally a 5-note quack, 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 and that's just a letting you know that I see you, I notice you. And it's pretty simple to do, and most duck hunters, that's probably one of the calls they use the most. Like quack, 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 quack.
All right. What about the comeback call?
the comeback call for ducks.
For ducks.
I never had to use it.
Never. Oh, look at that! Did you see
Always
that?
stay there.
I got the greeting call down. They come in all the time.
Yeah. Back to my highball.
That's one of those, and I think you could say the same because there's a comeback call for geese as well that we'll talk about here. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced anyway that any duck or goose has ever seen a flock up in the air not coming into them, and they're just begging for them to come back. I just don't know that happens. I'm not in the mind of those waterfowl, but that just I think that's us putting that sound in there.
By the time you're at a comeback call of any sort, things have gotten dire. Very, very dire. Things have gone wrong, and it's not likely to work. Yeah.
But it is one of those things that, and this is where I learned a lot of these duck calling terms from Hunter, is calling competitions.
Yep.
And that's one of them that you have to know to grade well. All right, so this is one called the feeding chuckle. Again, this is one I kind of scratch my head. Have you heard a duck chuckle?
I'd have to hear it from Jeff first.
Well, yeah, Jeff chuckles a lot.
Yeah,
So
I'm a chuckler. You know, the feeding chuckle is that, and then maybe a quack or two, quack. And the feeding chuckle, there's debate as to when you people think they should be hearing it. You people hear it on the water. I've heard it on the water with ducks, but when they're feeding, they're not making a lot of noise usually. But if they're fighting or they're getting nervous a little bit about feed, I might hear that chuckle. I know Hershey thinks he hears it when they're coming into the call.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when he hears it more than even on the water. I can't say I've heard it all that often that way, but it seems to be a call that when ducks are coming in and they're circling and you want to highball them. You don't want to even do too much greeting call because you don't want to give your position away. You just sit there and it just kind of keeps their attention and lets them know, yep, these are birds having a good time down here. You want to be here. And so it's just kind of I call it a confidence call. To me, they're kind of confidence calls.
it's kind of a soft call, so I can see
soft
that.
call.
You're not going to scare them away by doing it by any means. But yeah, I definitely hear it more when they're now. It's one of those things you can't be calling right at them in here because it's a pretty subtle call, but you can hear them while they're, especially bigger flocks, moving around. I think it's almost a contact call between each of the ducks. Because hey, point of reference, Hunter, when Jeff goes quiet, there's a good chance he's eating. I mean it's one of those things. I just don't think they make.
There's a lot of parallels between
there's so many times
humans eating and ducks
interrupted
eating.
by birds when I'm trying to eat, and it's just frustrating. It really is. There's no decorum in the duck blind whatsoever if birds are going to come in when you're eating, and then people expect you to call, right? Well, it's not good.
You think about your Thanksgiving dinner, which is just around the corner. It's one of those things. Everyone's laughing, having fun, talking football, talking about what's going on, hunting, all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, meal served, and it goes quiet for just a little bit. And all you can hear is the knives on plates, forks hitting the bowls, that type of stuff. So, all right, we're going to geese now. And obviously they honk.
Yep.
They honk, but we couldn't just keep it at that. We couldn't, as goose hunters, we couldn't just leave it at that. What are some of the calls that we say geese make or that hunters make to try to bring those in, guys?
The honk.
Yep, the honk.
The honk is kind of what? What would you call the honk? Kind of a greeting, kind of a, yep, I recognize you. I'm just, hello. And geese up high, honk, one down low, honk, and they just, have a basic conversation there. Yep, and that can be just all it takes sometimes to get a goose honking back and forth to you, and then go silent, let them come in. Of course, there's I call a moan now, and that moan can be deadly, especially when geese are maybe a little call shy. The moan sometimes is all it takes to get them in there. Goose grunt, and that grunt is something we use a lot when geese are circling, and you don't want to spook them. You don't want to give too much calls, especially on water, and so you might just give them that little bit of groan or something. And so we'll use a groan to kind of get their attention, and that can work really well too. And again, confidence calls, the moan or the groans are confidence calls. Honks can be really good confidence calls, and then.
When they're slipping away,
that comeback call, that's more of an excited, almost like screaming, begging for them to come back. And so instead of a honk, honk, it's honk, honk, It's kind of the opposite of a honk, really, and you're kind of whining to them to come back, and that really can get their attention, and that whine, you almost plead with them, don't leave, and some birds, I've seen it many times when we give that call, and I go to that call quite a bit because I see a lot of birds leaving, and I give that call, and a lot of times I'll turn some birds around, maybe not the entire flock, 2 or 3 birds turn around and come back, and again, they don't need to land. I just need them to come back and give us a look close enough that we can take our shots. And so sometimes that'll work. But like I said before, when they're leaving, it's gone bad. things have gotten dire.
Now, and I will say, and we've heard that, like you said, the comeback called a backwards honk almost. Yep. And like I said, to me, geese honk, and there's variations of how we do it and how excited we get and all that stuff. And then you have the moan or the lay down, like you were talking about, kind of that grunting noise. They make some other noises too. We just don't usually hear them when they're flying as much. It doesn't carry near as much. I know young ones, especially early in the year, kind of a nasally whistle thing that they'll do back and forth with the adults in the group, and you'll hear that all the way through this season, which is kind of fun. And to me, ducks, yeah, they quack back and forth, but with geese, you're really talking to them. You really seem to be able to make some noise, because ducks can sneak up on you. It's like, oh, there's some ducks, I think. And then you start hitting them with the Highball and all that, where geese, it's a lot of times you hear them before you see them.
Absolutely.
It's like, did you hear that? That's a goose. I heard that. Yep.
And that contact, that honk, when you contact back to them, or even a series of honk, and get a conversation going with those geese, and sometimes you can take that conversation right into gun range. I mean, it really is a dialogue, a conversation.
Now, here's one that I'm going to toss out to both of you. This is one I think we're hearing a little bit less in the state of Nebraska, and that is a goose-specific term, and we sometimes will talk about dark goose and light goose. So, Hunter, dark goose and light goose. Did you use that where you grew up?
Not commonly, no. Familiar a little more with it now as of being out here, but not too common of a term out in Wisconsin.
Sure.
So, dark goose is
Canada
your
goose. Yep.
Canada goose.
Brants be in that as well. Brants and Canadas. Light goose is going to be your snow geese. And where do you put specks?
In Nebraska, we put them in their own season. Yeah. We put them in the white-fronted goose season. Yeah. So if you do hear specks, that's another term for white-fronted goose. Yeah. But we have their own season. But it is interesting. We don't see a lot of brant here by any means. No. I don't know that I've ever seen a brant in person in the interior, but they do happen. That's the beauty of waterfowl. I mean, and you point out a great point, Jeff, when it comes to nicknames. Waterfowl, they live it. I mean, they do, like you said, specks, which is the white-fronted goose.
Speckle bellies.
And ducks, greenhead usually is
mallard.
Drake mallard. Yep. Susie.
Yeah, that's the hen. Yep.
That's the hen mallard right there. Gray duck.
Yeah. And see, we throw all these things out there, woodies, wood duck, and then we throw all these things out there. And then we wonder why people are confused what we're talking about sometimes, And, I'm kind of scared because to join that group of distinguished ladies and gentlemen, because, I maybe don't know that lingo. Well, these are the type, just in the duck world, how crazy it can get. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's one I'm going to toss out there. We've really haven't rehearsed this one at all. This is one I tossed in on myself. Like I said, we've asked everyone, a lot of non-hunters, about these hunting terms that they hear that they don't know what it means. But I put this one in here because I think in waterfowl, especially here in Nebraska, we love to decoy ducks and geese, and it is a lot of fun. This is kind of a lost art, in my opinion, and that's the jump shoot. And it can be very productive. It's one of those things you don't need your deeks, your decoys, your spread, your fakes, your whatever you want to call them. So we got to tell people what a jump shoot is. Did you do that in Wisconsin much?
I think it's a little more common in Wisconsin. So jump shooting is, you're sneaking up on birds that are already there, typically on smaller bodies of water, streams or creeks or ponds, and sneaking up on them and jumping them into a shot. And obviously there's a little more safety concerns there because you're sneaking up on them instead of you waiting for them to come in. But it can be very effective strategy for hunting ducks if you're effective at it.
And Jeff, we've kind of seen that maybe in snow geese during that spring conservation order, probably a little bit more than anything. But I know I cut my teeth on wood ducks where they can be the most antisocial thing. You put your decoys here and they're just automatically moving to the other end of the creek, the stream, the pond, whatever. And so if you wanted to chase them on those really nice warm days that we get every once in a while in duck hunting, you had to start moving and jump shooting because they'd get right alongside that bank or under some fallen brush, and lots of fun. But jump shooting is an interesting one, to say the least. All right, now we've got a whole bunch more, and if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see you got 2 whole pages here. I might tie us out 1 or 2 more, but I will say we got a whole section here just on turkeys. And I know this isn't fair, Hunter, because you work for the National Turkey Federation, but we're going to save this one because, we got plenty of opportunities to hunt fall turkeys here in the state of Nebraska, but this really gets interesting. And a lot of the terms people hear during turkey hunts or from turkey hunters come from the spring, which is a little bit more popular across much of the Great Plains and Midwest as fall turkey is. So we're going to probably leave that for another show. But I got a question. What are some of the terms that either deer hunting, pheasant, waterfowl, or just general hunt terms you guys have heard people use or maybe have used yourself that you think people might not know exactly what it is if they don't hunt?
Good question.
Something big in Wisconsin that is kind of a tradition is doing deer drives, and I don't know how big.
And
that
deer
is.
don't drive. We all know that, right?
Right.
I mean, we know that.
Not supposed to.
They're not supposed to. That's right.
Not supposed to. Yeah. What is a deer drive?
Deer drives, when you kind of have a group of hunters and could be anywhere from 3 or 4 to maybe even 10 if you're hunting a big piece of property, and you have your drivers or your walkers that are going to be walking through the woods or through the fields, and then your standers or sitters that are going to be sitting down on the other end waiting for you to push and jump deer to you. So it's takes a little bit of planning to make sure you're doing it safe again, but just another way to move deer instead of sitting in a stand or still hunting or stalking them. You're actively moving those deer towards your standers or your shooters in hopes of a harvest, and a good way to get deer moving on a windy day where they might be bedded down, where you really have to step on them to get them up and moving. So just another strategy for deer hunting.
Yeah. Tried and true.
Jeff, you got any terms?
Well, no, rattling. People call
rattling.
it rattling deer.
That's what my truck does.
Yeah, well, that's what all of our trucks do, I think. But rattling deer, we're not actually rattling the deer, but deer, of course, have antlers. Those antlers are made for a purpose, and that major purpose of those antlers is to fight other deer for the dominance, pecking order, right to breed, and whatnot. And hunters, we find those antlers and we grind them together and make all kinds of clacking, rattling type noises, and that simulates 2 bucks fighting. Of course, when you're talking about animals that have a hierarchy or a pecking order, and there's one that might have more dominance over the others, they hear 2 bucks fighting in their territory, they a lot of times just come running and towards you. And so rattling is a tried and true method of bringing in deer, and it works really well, especially as we get into this early November. You're probably taking the next 2 weeks, the best 2 weeks for rattling in the entire calendar. Early November through the middle.
All right, I'm going to toss this one out too to you, Jeff, because we are a deer check-in state. So you do here, especially during the November firearm season. I got to check the deer. I got to check. Got to check my deer and all that type of stuff. Now that non-hunter or even the new hunter, just like, what are you checking your deer for? I mean, yeah,
make sure it's all
I'll
there.
help you. I'll help you. Are we counting hooves or something?
Yeah.
So what does it mean to check your deer?
Sure. Well, as soon as your deer's down, the first thing you're going to do is cancel your tag. And that's another term I know, but you make your tag, you cancel your tag, you identify the date and the sex of the animal that was harvested. And then you take that deer later that day or what have you to a check station and during the firearm season. And that's where we have staff, biologists, whatnot, there. It'll be a gas station, could be, whatever the case may be in small towns all across the state, and parking lots, whatnot. And you'll take your deer to that check station, and our biologists will look over the deer, and they're looking for a number of things. We're talking about pretty trained staff, and they're looking at overall health, just glancing at the deer for its health. They may take samples from the deer, depending on what they're looking for, glands or whatnot. And And then, of course, they're going to ask you some basic questions. Where did you harvest the deer? What county? How many days did you hunt? Some basic information so that they can track success rates and they can track deer health. And then they're going to affix a state seal to that carcass, and that's a kind of a metal ribbon, if you will, that once it's locked, it can't unlock, and on the antler or the leg or what have you. And that tells everybody from that point on that deer we've gotten the data off that deer. It's been officially checked in, and now that deer you're able to take it to a processor and have them turn that beautiful carcass into jerky.
There you go. The November firearm season, our most popular deer season here in Nebraska, is when you have to check that deer in at the station. You can find those on our website, outdoornebraska.org. Now, last one, Hunter. This is one of the trickier ones, I really think. And sometimes I scratch my head on the best way to describe this to new hunters or those that have been around for a while, in fact. And that's bag limit versus possession limit. And every state has a bag limit and a possession limit. Oftentimes. So that's something that hunters, regardless if you're in Nebraska or beyond, you're going to have to know what that is. So let's start with bag limit.
Yep, daily bag limit is just the number of animals, and it's going to be further restricted by sex or species that you can take in one day. So in Nebraska, the daily bag limit for rabbits, I believe, is 27. Sorry, so 7.
Ooh, 27. We just got
so I could
7.
So one day out, if I'm out rabbit hunting, I could harvest 7 rabbits, and then your possession limit is going to be the total aggregate amount of that species that you can have in your possession at one time. So as soon as you consume that animal, you're no longer in possession of it. But if I hunted 4 days in a row and shot 7 rabbits a day, I'd be at my 28 aggregate possession limit.
Math again.
Yeah,
My goodness.
He's a champ on the math. There's no question about it.
And I think that's the huge part. Bag limit, usually that daily, just one, boom. It has to do with time. And then possession, how throughout the season. That's the number, fair chase and all that good stuff. So that's good. All right, guys, we kind of come to the end of this one. I know we got a whole bunch more we could get into, but we're not here. We might leave those for some other hangouts here on Hunt Nebraska. So I appreciate you guys both being here. First and foremost. And folks out there in listening land, make sure you get on our Facebook page, Hunt Nebraska. If you got a term or a little bit of hunter lingo that you want to know the answer to or know the answer to, post it right there on Hunt Nebraska. Make sure you give us a like there and follow and see everything that's going on, because hunting season is on us and we've got a lot of great content going on there. And make sure you stop by, rate this podcast on whatever audio platform you're making use of, and subscribe, give us a follow, because you'll know then the next time we drop our next Hunt Nebraska podcast. So appreciate you guys listening out there. We'll see you on the next side.
Hunt Nebraska, brought to you by your Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.